Chapter 5. Collapse and Retreat. Lieutenant General John Pemberton's Confederate Army is now caught in the open, surprised, and outnumbered by Major General Ulysses Grant's Union Army. Pemberton is trying to defend Vicksburg. Grant wants to capture Vicksburg. The battle they're fighting is at Champion Hill, about 20 miles east of Vicksburg, and it'll be the pivotal battle of the Vicksburg campaign. The map you see here is adapted from one I found in the atlas to the official records. Bolton is on the east, near the upper right corner of the map. Edwards is on the west, at the left edge. The crossroads is here. Baker's Creek runs in a loop from the northeast to the southwest. Blue icons are Union infantry brigades. Gray icons are Confederate infantry brigades. The Confederate battle flag marks General Pemberton's location. The U.S. flag marks General Grant's location. Grant's army managed to get themselves across Pemberton's left flank and collapsed it. Bowen's division counterattacked with great success, but because of disagreements among the Confederate generals, Bowen's counterattack was not supported, and it was pushed back. See Buford's brigade from Loring's Confederate division, as finally they come up to support. Too late, but they're coming. According to Warren Grabow in his book 98 Days, General Pemberton rode along Ratliff Road, looking for the rest of Loring's division. There are 3 brigades in Loring's division. Pemberton met Buford on their way north up the Ratliff Road, so one of the 3 brigades is accounted for. But where is General Loring and the other 2 brigades? After meeting Buford, Pemberton continued south, looking for General Loring. And according to Warren Grabow, he continued south to a high point on the road near the Ratliff House. From this high spot, Pemberton was able to look out further to the south and see a Union division deployed across the Raymond Road, but no sign of Loring's division. And Grabow writes that Pemberton assumed, based on what he could see, that Loring's division had fallen back and uncovered the junction of the Ratliff and Raymond roads, which meant that Union troops now had an open path into the rear of Bowen's and Stevenson's divisions at the crossroads. As Grabow wrote, in horror and despair, Pemberton spurred back down the Ratliff Road to the Roberts House, where Bowen sadly informed him that the crossroad was lost and that there was no hope whatever of retaking it. When Buford's brigade came forward to support Bowen, Brigadier General Abraham Buford led them straight north on Ratliff Road. But that's not what happened with Featherston's brigade. Brigadier General Winfield Featherston, in his report, wrote that General Loring and a guide directed them the nearest way for 2 miles to the fighting. But Timothy Smith, in his book, The Inland Campaign for Vicksburg, described it a bit differently. Smith wrote that Loring and Featherston together got thoroughly turned around on the wrong road and going in the wrong direction. I'll back the tape up and rerun it so that you can follow the route that Featherston followed to the front. Loring and Featherston followed another road. Warren Grabow identifies it as the Coker Road. It's not on the map, which led in a long loop to the west. By the way, Abraham Buford is a cousin of John Buford. John Buford is the Union cavalry general, famous for his service in the Gettysburg campaign. It occurs to me that this business of using a guide and getting lost foreshadows what will happen later that evening when Loring leads his division away from the battlefield. The delay in getting Featherston's brigade up to the line limited how much of a role they played compared to Buford's brigade. Smith wrote that Buford's brigade engaged near the crossroads at this point, lending support at a critical spot, while Featherston's brigade played little significant part in the fight except at the very end of the day, when it provided some last-line defense as the Confederate army withdrew. When Pemberton returned to the Roberts House, he finally caught up with Loring. Pemberton ordered Loring to deploy to cover the retreat of Bowen's and Stevenson's divisions and gather up as many stragglers as he could find. Loring finally now had 2 of his 3 brigades there, Buford's and Featherston's brigades, and they deployed south of the Jackson Road. Now, finally, McClernand's Union troops on the Middle Road started to move, and the Confederate roadblock east of the crossroads collapsed. General Pemberton ordered his army to retreat toward the lower Baker's Creek Bridge. The lower crossing was closed when they passed that way the day before. If it was still not passable, then they would lose their artillery and wagons, but at least the infantry would survive to fight another day. You may remember from Chapter 3 that Major Lockett, early in the morning, assigned a company of pioneers to rebuild the bridge and reopen the ford at the lower crossing. It must have been about the time that General Bowen started his counterattack that they finished their work, so the lower crossing was now open again. And the writers tell us that just as General Pemberton was ordering his army to retreat and head to the lower crossing, a courier rode up and gave Pemberton 2 key pieces of information. Number 1, the courier told Pemberton that, as I just said, the bridge and ford at the lower crossing were now open, and 2, there was a bypass road, another road not shown on this map, that led directly from Pemberton's position to the crossing. Pemberton must have recognized that he had lost the battle and that probably now the route to Vicksburg was open for the Federals. The priorities now were to save as much of the army as possible and to get his army back to Vicksburg before Grant's army could get there. The news about the crossing opening up and the direct road to the crossing meant that now the Confederate army had an avenue of retreat that would let them save their artillery and ambulances, which would be needed in Vicksburg. And I mentioned a moment ago that McClernand's troops on Middle Road had started to move. They first ran into Bowen's retreating Confederate division, then the flank of Crocker's and Hovey's Union divisions chasing Bowen's division, and then Buford's and Featherston's Confederate brigades deployed along Jackson Road to defend the retreating troops. Union troops on the Raymond Road to the south were also making progress, but not so much. Everyone else on the Confederate side had gone north to try to retake the crossroads, and all that was left on the Raymond Road now was the last brigade in Loring's division, Tillman's brigade. It was one brigade to defend the Raymond Road against a full Federal division, but Warren Grabo described the Federal progress against Tillman's lone brigade as glacier slow, and wrote that the Confederate force in the Federal front disappeared. Then night fell, and Union Brigadier General A.J. Smith actually called off the action and let his men bivouac along the road. Stephen Smith, in his book, The Inland Campaign for Vicksburg, described, up here, 5 divisions of Union infantry pressing southwest against a fleeing mass of rebel troops. General Loring was there with Buford and Featherston's brigades. In Loring's report, he wrote, "I found the whole country, on both sides of the road, covered with the fleeing of our army, in many cases in large squads, and there was no one endeavoring to rally or direct them." It seems that Featherston and Buford's brigades led the defense in the retreat southwest to the crossing. Cummings' brigade crossed first, then Lee's brigade. Bowen's division and Lee's brigade were 2 formations that were still pretty much intact. Lee deployed his brigade to guard the crossing while Bowen's division crossed. General Pemberton crossed with Bowen's division, and he ordered Bowen's division to replace Lee's brigade and hold the crossing until the rest of the army was across. At this point, the rest of the army is mostly Loring's division. Meanwhile, Federal troops are closing in from the north. About 7 p.m., Benton's brigade had moved far enough to the south to be able to see a Confederate column to the south on the Raymond Road. Maybe this was Lee's brigade, and the Federals opened fire on them with artillery. General Bowen was still holding on to the crossing, holding it open for Loring's division. According to Warren Grabow, Loring's advanced guard crossed the bridge and marched towards Edwards, following the rest of the army. It sounds like this advanced guard was a regiment, and the commander saw fires burning ahead of them in the town, and he interpreted this to mean that the Federals had captured Edwards. He turned the regiment around, and they met the rest of Loring's division back on the east side of the creek. This would be about 7:30 p.m. General Bowen was still holding on to the crossing. Apparently, in all the confusion, he didn't realize that Loring's advance guard had crossed and come back, or maybe this hadn't happened yet. But Grabow writes that the artillery fire to the west on the Raymond Road, and apparently this was Benton's Union Brigade, which I described a bit earlier, the artillery fire convinced General Bowen that the town of Edwards had fallen, and his retreat route was cut off. With this in mind, Bowen sent a message to General Loring telling him that he was abandoning the crossing. Bowen marched his division cross-country to the south past Edwards to the Confederate lines on the Big Black River. Note that General Bowen, without assistance from local guides, in contrast to Loring's division, which I'll describe in a moment, was able to find his way to rejoin General Pemberton's Vicksburg army. Loring received Bowen's message that he was abandoning the crossing. Loring wrote in his report that he was unable to find a crossing of Baker's Creek and was forced cross-country south and east, marching through the night. Loring's report is interesting reading, and you can find it in the official records, Volume 24, Part 2. Loring's division lost all their artillery, baggage, and wagons. Many of Loring's men lost their rifles, and Grabow writes that the division emerged at Crystal Springs, south of Jackson, on May 18, and from there they made their way north to join General Johnston's army. The rest of Pemberton's army made their way across the Big Black River and into Vicksburg. Grant's army chased them through Edwards and toward the Big Black River late into the night and eventually caught up to the Confederate rear guard at the Big Black River Bridge, where another battle was fought the next day, on May 17. Warren Grabow provided casualty figures in a table. I'll show you Grabow's data here. Especially see the high casualty totals for Stevenson's and Hovey's divisions, and compare to the low totals for the Union divisions that were on the Raymond and Middle Roads. Grabow wrote out a list of conclusions. Notably, he wrote that the three Union divisions on the Jackson Road, and that's Logan's, Crocker's, and Hovey's divisions, won the battle virtually alone, that the two Union divisions on the Raymond Road never actually got into action at all, and that of the two Union divisions on the Middle Road, Osterhaus and Carr, only one division was engaged, and that scarcely seriously. Major General James McPherson gets credit from Warren Grabow as the man that won the Battle of Champion Hill. McPherson was a West Point graduate, class of 1853. Before Champion Hill, McPherson fought alongside General Grant at the Battle of Shiloh. McPherson eventually rose to command the Army of the Tennessee and was killed during the Battle of Atlanta on July 22, 1864. Brigadier General John Bowen was also a West Point graduate, in the same class as General McPherson. Bowen also fought at Shiloh and led the Confederate side at the battles of Grand Gulf and Port Gibson. At the Battle of Port Gibson, despite being badly outnumbered, the Confederates, under Bowen's command, held off Grant's army for most of the day. Wikipedia says Bowen was promoted to Major General on May 25, but the promotion was never approved by the Confederate Congress. John Bowen contracted dysentery during the siege at Vicksburg and died after the siege ended on July 13 near Edwards, Mississippi. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Please add comments if you have suggestions for improving these videos.